Leadership is challenging. And I think that in a lot of ways it's painted as this very simple and you're supposed to be charismatic and everyone's supposed to follow you. It's supposed to be so easy. You can become a leader if you really want to become a leader. It's like there's this whole thing about, they're just naturally born with it. Just take the time to be the best you possibly can be and stick with it. Like you said, years of experience, it's like putting in the reps over and over and over again. You're gonna get better at it. If you're committed to it, you'll get better at it.
So you have a passion for fitness and the desire to start your own business. But launching a massively successful fitness business is extremely complex. The systems, operations, hiring, firing, coaching, sales, and marketing are critical to success. Where do you even start? This show will give you the answers. Here is Bedros Keuilian and Bryce Henson, your hosts of the Fitness Franchise Podcast, a show dedicated to helping fitness entrepreneurs launch and grow successful gyms.
And today's guest, who's a dear friend of mine, who is the CEO of the Works Consulting Agency. She's also a former HR director of a Fortune 500 company that led a merger and acquisition of over 600 employees. She has her Master's of Arts in Organizational Management, and she's here today on this episode going to teach you the 3 leadership secrets to grow your team and grow your profits. Miss Anne Laguzza, welcome to the show. Anne Laguzza, my friend, welcome to the show.
It is so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for rescheduling. I know I got a little down and out recently, but I'm super excited to be on the show after you taught our mastermind group, and now you're here delivering more value to our audience. So thanks so much for being on.
Absolutely. I can't wait to talk. It's going to be great.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, as I teed up in the intro, you are a leadership expert. You're an HR expert, so a lot of things to talk through. The first question I always like to ask is, give us the backstory. How did you really wind up where you're at today?
Every time I get asked this question, I was like, where do I start? But I'll say that the thing that's made the biggest impact on me and where I am in human resources and leadership today, it's kind of been 2 kind of places that made a big impact. One is that I got a job, my second job out of college, as a human resources manager, which is a little unusual. I don't know what you know about human resources in general, but it's a little unusual because you usually start in more of like an assistant or administrative role. And I was able to just jump right into a management role. There were 150 employees at the company. They basically taught me everything I knew. All they were looking for was someone who's enthusiastic and a college graduate. And I had both of those things and I got the job. And I had an amazing leader there, really set me up for success. And I didn't really even realize like what that was going to do for my long-term career, but just starting there and the training that I had there really just set my career up for success. The second like big moment in my career is when I decided to go out on my own. And I was working for a company that they were kind of going through some struggles. They had doubled in size. Now they're decreasing in size. And they were not including me in the layoff, but we were laying off a lot of people. And I really wanted to start my own business. So I just went to the CEO one day and I said, would you be willing to lay me off and let me move on? Because I want to do my own business. And he said yes. He had some I needed to help them through a few things, but he's like, I need you to do some work for us for a couple months and help us out. But I absolutely will help you, transition into the next stage in your career. So that was huge because I didn't really have a big plan. I didn't have some people who start off in consulting have like clients lined up or potentials. I didn't have anything. I just knew it's what I wanted to do and it wasn't the opportunity. I just knew it was the time to do it.
That's funny. I don't know if he's ever been asked that question before, but good on you for basically speaking your mind and also to be willing to transition.
Absolutely.
Backing up a little bit, we were talking off camera and doing the prep for the show, but you went to UC Riverside and you got a psychology degree.
Yes.
So you talked about the first gig you got was being basically straight into HR manager after you graduated from UC Riverside. What about HR was interesting to you? Was it the psychology, that background? I'm just curious how that came together.
So this is so funny. When I got my psychology degree, I was planning to stay in the psychology arena. I thought I would go on and get my master's degree and eventually a PhD at some point. And I had a huge life moment in college where my mom passed away and it completely just changed the direction. Like I basically I loved college, but I got to get into kind of graduating and then I didn't know what I wanted to do anymore at that moment. So I worked one job before I got my first HR job, which was for a car rental company, which a lot of people know. Okay. And I worked there for a year. I learned a lot there, so HR really fell in my lap. It was like a friend of a friend in college. Her mom was looking for this it was a brand new HR manager role, and they were seeking people out, like I said, that were kind of college degreed, enthusiastic. Yeah. So I really fell into it, and then I kind of loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved doing the human resources part, and I also had responsibility for developing team members, and I just loved it.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited because I think actually in the shows that we've shot, I don't have I've had a few leadership experts, but not HR. So to combine them both is going to be really exciting for us. So I want to dive into maybe some HR and leadership things here in a second, but then flipping back to basically when you decided to kind of open up your own consulting, the Works Consulting, is that basically the pivot when you open up your own consulting firm?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So talk us about that. Like, what's the firm about? I want to kind of give you the opportunity to share a little bit and also to some good knowledge for our audience.
Yeah. So when I started the Works Consulting, I was really focused on human resources and leadership development, but really a lot more on the human resources side. I'm based in California. There's a lot of laws here, a lot of compliance. And as I went on in, getting clients and all of that, what I found is that the laws are one piece, but the leaders really need help. They really are challenged with, how do I manage people? Like, you often get promoted because you're really good at your job, but now you're managing people, and that's a whole different thing than doing the thing, right? Than doing the task. And there's not a lot of support for that in most companies. I mean, they just kind of assume that you're going to figure it out or whatever. So I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So, and still today, I would say a lot of people come to our company through the human resources side. Either they're recruiting new people and they want our help with that, or, they're putting together an employee handbook or job descriptions or just whatever, things like that. But then we find that long term, where we start working with them is really on the people management and how to, hire the best, keep them, and then when it's time to go, help them move on.
So high level, kind of drilling down, and then I guess the HR pathway leads to leadership. But what are some big, takeaways and things that our audience should know? Because our audience are interested in entrepreneurship, business ownership. So they're launching, their business, their fitness business, an example. What are some big takeaways from the HR realm that every business owner coming in should be aware of?
We hear a lot of people complaining about laws. And what I say is, just do them, right? Like, just embrace it. Let's not spend a lot of time, energy on being frustrated about it. Just figure out what they are. If you have the capability to be able to change them and, whatever that means politically, do it. But in the meantime, just understand them and do them, right? And follow them, I should say. And that might sound super basic, but I think people get so lost in like, oh, this is really inconvenient, or this isn't, how am I going to do this? It's like, just figure it out, because that is like, to me, that's an easy checkbox. It's like law, checkbox, law, checkbox, and just figure it out and do it, right? So I think that's one thing, which again, sounds maybe super simple, but I find that a lot of people spend so much energy and the frustration over the laws, wherever you live, right? It doesn't matter.
I want to interject. I mean, you tee this up, being in California, I feel like it's so compliant rich here. It's so challenging. I think I read a business report that it's, I think, the worst state to do business, or the top few in terms of just compliance and all that. So do you have clients in other states, and kind of like give us some differences that you see, I guess?
Yeah, we have clients in all states, well, not all, but many different states, I should say. And I would say that, there are still laws they have to comply with, right? And there's still things they have to do. So it might not be quite as, intense as California is, but they still have to follow them. So it's like, just figure out what you do need to follow and follow that and kind of move that on. And I would say that's one of the big things in the HR side. And then the other thing, and this kind of dips into the leadership side a little bit, is just that the people are going to be one of the most important thing in your business. Obviously revenue is probably maybe the most important thing, but your people are going to get you there.
People drive that revenue.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is good. So you've got to figure out how you're going to manage that aspect of your business, which like I said, it kind of goes a little human resources and leadership, but the people are so important. And one thing that I hear a lot from leaders that I work with is that they don't have time. Like, I don't have time, and I don't have time to manage all these people issues. I don't have time to manage my people. And I literally have said, well, then I don't think you should be in business, or I don't think you should be a leader. Because you have to make the time. You can't just hire someone. This is something that happens a lot. We help a lot of people with recruiting, and they'll say, I want someone who will hit the ground running. That's like this common thing that gets said. And I'm like, okay, I understand, like, in theory what they're saying, but some people literally do not want to train the person. They just want them to show up and do the job. So I'll say, I've been doing this for a long time. And even if you hired me today, do I know human resources? Yes. Could I generally get through? Yes. I don't know who to communicate with to get certain things done, right? I don't know, even I joke, like, I don't even know where the restroom is, right? I'm not going to know certain things. So you can't expect to hire someone and just have them come in and know how to do the job. You have to have the time to make sure you onboard them correctly, train them in your company's culture, values, right? Your expectations as a leader so that they can be successful.
Totally. Looking at kind of bird's eye view, what would you say in your experience, especially working with your clients, are like some big mistakes that you see from an HR? I mean, you kind of alluded to the fact of people just wanting their employees from day one to be trained.
Yes.
But that's a false expectation, as you've articulated. To your point, it's kind of like opening up a restaurant and then not wanting to make food. I mean, that's just part of the business is, working with people.
Yeah.
But what are some big issues that you see and red flags and no-nos and I guess mistakes in that realm?
Definitely not hiring the best people they absolutely can get. Saying things like, well, this is sort of, we'll just hire a warm body and we'll figure it out. We have 90 days, in some of the franchises, I don't know if this applies, but in some of the companies we work with, they'll say it's like a 90-day introductory period and then they can eliminate the position if it doesn't work out. Instead, it's like, no, hire the absolute best person. This isn't because sometimes they're just thinking about the person they're bringing in. Well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just move them out and bring in another one and move them out. And they have no idea what that's doing to the rest of the team and the impact that it's having because they're watching this and they're like, why can't we keep anybody? Why is this a revolving door? What's going on? So I think hiring the best is definitely. So a no-no would be do not just hire warm bodies, absolutely hire the best.
And I'll interject that, especially in our business, the fitness business, because, owners, when they're bringing on their team, like our team is the product. So at the end of the day, like for example, if you go to a steak restaurant, your people, your servers are helping, but the steak is the product. Yeah. But in the fitness business, like your people are the product. So from the very beginning, they have to be firing on all cylinders. And granted, I guess they need to be trained very thoroughly, but you can't just basically find a placeholder because if you do, to your point, it's a revolving door. Then clients are like, oh, shoot, what's going on here? It brings the morale down. So, I mean, I just want to double down on that specific to our industry. Yeah,
it's such a big deal. And I just find that people do that a lot. They just don't think about the overall impact that really can have. I think another thing that, especially, I will say it's really hot in this moment, but in my opinion, it's been a big deal for a long time, is you've got to value your team members. Like you have to be able to convey to them why they are so important to the team and your mission, why you selected them. Someone just told me recently, and I love this idea. Someone said that they offered someone a job, but as they offered them the job, they said, well, we want to let you know, we are so excited we're offering you the position. We interviewed 20 people and we looked at 500 resumes and we selected you. And I was like, oh, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, you feel good about that, right?
Totally.
Nobody ever, and I was like, how did you come up with that idea? And they're like, I don't know, it just seemed like a good idea. Just like, let's tell them what we went through to pick them. It's like, that was I love that. And I'm like, everybody should be doing that for sure.
I love that too.
Because people they want to feel important. We spend so much time at work and you want to feel that you're contributing to something. And I know this has even gotten talked about a lot in the last few years. People want to, feel like they're really adding some value to the world. And we're not all, necessarily saving the trees, right? We're doing different things. We're all doing different businesses, but we all contribute to the world that we're in. And I think every employee should know that they add value to that. It's just so important.
Totally.
And it gets missed. Like that's a no-no, is that people just miss that and they think, oh, well, of course they know that I hired them, or, they should already be aware of that. Every time someone says that to me, I'm like, nope. No. You got to tell people. Like they don't just know.
Yeah, totally.
When somebody says like, no news is good news. Yeah. I always say no news is no news. That's what it is. It's just nothing. If you haven't said anything to an employee, they don't know if that's good or bad.
And I feel like from a leadership perspective, like communication is so important. Yes. So for me, I feel like no news is bad news.
Yes. I agree completely.
Love that. On the same kind of topic, if you mentioned recruiting, and 2022 and this year has been very challenging for that. So can you talk a little bit about like kind of the temperature, kind of where we're at, maybe some do's and don'ts in recruiting, some really like strong recommendations, and Bryce, you should never do this.
Recruiting this is for me, I mean, I've been doing this again for a long time. This is the wildest recruiting market I have ever seen. So if anybody's feeling, the challenge, they should know that they're not alone, right? Everybody's feeling it. No matter what industry, it's happening everywhere. There's just a lot of competition. Some of the things we always tell our clients is Number one, do not lose the candidate during the process. Like if you say, I'm going to call you on Wednesday with an update, be sure you call them on Wednesday with an update. Even if the update is, we haven't made a decision yet, we're still finishing interviews, don't forget about them.
Communication.
Yes,
no news is bad news.
All right. Because they're like out there, out there interviewing and trying to find the best spot for them. And if you tell them you're going to check in and you don't check in, then that's giving them information about you.
Yeah, and from like this competitive market, which you mentioned, that's very good, obviously, to make sure that the client or your prospect has a good understanding where you're currently at, so you keep engaged. But that's just like common courtesy as well. Like it's just good practice, whatever market you're in, whether it's a tight recruiting market or not. So sage advice.
So true. It was, I remember reading, I think it was on LinkedIn or something, but somebody was saying, these applicants are they're ghosting us, they're disappearing during the process. And somebody wrote a comment like, hey, employers have been doing that for years. And I thought, it's so true, right? So just treat them with respect, keep them in the loop, let them know what's going on at all times. I would say another piece of advice, which is, again, it's always a little tough. It's something that we do for our clients, but you just kind of got to be relentless in your pursuit to find the best person. And it's just every day you're working on it. Every day you might be contacting people who don't contact you back. You might be meeting people that aren't a good match, but you just have to keep working on it until you find the right person. And there's no magic pill. Like when people hire us, they're like, well, how are you finding people, right? And I'm like, we just work on it relentlessly.
Full court press.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you don't have the time to work on that every day.
No.
You're running a company, right? Yeah. Or you're running a gym or whatever you're doing. You don't have time to work on that every day. You have other things you're doing. So if you can get the support to have somebody help you with that, even if it's internally, that's amazing. If not, you just know, if you kind of still, okay, I got to juggle, I got to do both, you just know it's going to take a little more time and not to get frustrated. Mm-hmm. Just keep going. It's so important. Oh, I'm so torn. You said 3. I love the onboarding piece. We can get to that. But one of the things I would say, it's kind of about that communication, is just release people when you're done. So if you're not hiring somebody, send them that thank you, no thank you is what I call it. Let them know. And when you have selected somebody, make sure to circle back around with everybody you've interviewed, because I feel like you never know what is going to happen and when that person might show back up for you. Just, again, that communication, that courtesy, just customer service around the interview process would be amazing. Like if everybody could do that.
It's interesting. I was just on a call with Matt Wilbur, who's a good friend of mine. You've done a training for his team, our most successful franchisee. And, he just talks about, his main focus. He has his wife actually, full court press every day, all day, recruiting just as aggressively as they're recruiting clients. And to your point, about, having that customer service element in play, whether it's clients or customers that you have, or whether it's your team, it's just good common practice.
It's so good. It's something in our office we celebrate every single time. So we get a lot of great feedback from our clients, but when an applicant says, thank you so much, you've made this process so easy, I've really enjoyed getting to know you, that's amazing. And that doesn't only come from people that we're able to, connect with an offer. It comes from people who we've had to say, well, the client hasn't chosen you, we're really sorry. And they still thank us and they leave feeling good about that. And that's huge, right? I'm just like, that's what we're trying to do. And I'm really looking at it from, I want my client to look good, right? I want them to I don't want anything bad connected to their name because we're representing them. But it's just such a great feeling. And then I know we've done a good job at taking care of them.
Love that. All right, so now let's transition to onboarding, and I want to talk about that. I want to talk about like terminations and resignations, all the fun stuff all you business owners just love, but it's just part of the job. So can you talk us a little bit about some onboarding pointers and recommendations?
Onboarding is so important. It is your opportunity to immediately connect that new hire to your company. And it's something that you need time, attention, you need to create a system for it and not just sort of toss it away as like, oh yeah, we'll figure it out as we go along. I was talking to a leader the other day and they had someone they were supposed to be onboarding and they said, oh, I had a family emergency and I had to leave for a couple days. And I said, oh, well, who took over? And it was sort of this convoluted mess. I'll be honest, because they didn't have a plan. Mm-hmm. Her plan was, I'm doing the onboarding and I know what I'm supposed to do and I know what steps I'm going through. But when she left, there wasn't like an agenda to hand over and say, okay, I got to run, but here's the things we're working on. And it's a little rough. So that right now they're trying to sort of save that new hire a little bit because they're feeling a little lost and a little confused. And do I fit in? And am I a match for this job? Because because they got lost in the shuffle, and they did their best to sort of pick it up. And the manager who picked it up really tried to make it seamless, but it wasn't ideal.
Yeah, and we know the value of first impressions, like in the dating world or just in life in general. And really, from an onboarding perspective, that's your first impression, to your point, to like really marry them to your company. And that's a great opportunity, but also can be a hugely missed opportunity as well.
Yes, I agree. I always say you got to connect them to the culture. Like, this is so important. The hiring supervisor should be that first person they see on that first day and the last person they see on the first day. And I always say, do that for 1 week. Morning and afternoon. You should be the person that they interact with. Because you might send them off to work with other people or interact, that's fine. But you should be the person. Every morning, well, obviously on the first day, it's a big welcome. We're so excited you're here, all of that. The end of the day is, how'd your day go, right? What'd you learn that was interesting today? Right? Was there anything, especially like gym owners, if they've worked in another gym, is there anything you've learned that we're doing that might be a little different from what you did before? And the reason I want them to ask that is because that could be where there's friction. It could be good. It could be like, oh, you know what? I love this system. We didn't have that at my gym. This is going to make it so much easier to like connect with clients. Or it could be like, oh yeah, it's really interesting that you do XYZ this way because that's not how we did it. And I'm wondering, so you can tell and you start, you're doing like a temp check. Morning and night. So then the second day isn't obviously a welcome necessarily because they've already started, but it's like, welcome back. After you went home last night, did you think of anything that you were like, oh, I wish I would have asked that question? And if they're like, no, I'm good, great. Here's the agenda for the day, right? And then you wrap up the end of the day. How'd your day go? And again, you don't have to ask every open-ended question every day, but maybe just ask one open-ended question, just do a temp check, see how they're doing. And I say 1 week for sure, if not 2, their first 2 weeks.
I love that. And it's also to your point about, kind of checking in, getting, their temperature. And if they're like, oh my God, I love it, well, then you obviously know you're on that track. But even if they're like, oh, it's a little different than, kind of the analogy that you painted, it's an opportunity for you as a leader to be like, lean in and be like, oh, tell me about that. Maybe you can actually learn something new from them, right?
Absolutely. So. And you know what? I love what you just said about even if they say they love it and they're excited, what a lot of times leaders do is at that moment you go, oh, cool. And you're like, yes, and that's it. I always say, ask them to tell you more. Like, so that is so great to hear, Bryce. Tell me what it is you're loving so far, because that's going to, again, start to give me more information about what it is you're connecting with, and then I can hopefully make sure that continues to happen.
We say in our business, the curse of knowledge sometimes, because it's important because, we do from a gym perspective and you're, training clients and, giving a great atmosphere and a client experience, but sometimes that just kind of business as usual, especially like our top performing owners, they don't really they don't really fully realize that's so much value they're adding, and it's really good from that perspective, a new person coming in to be able to shine that light. So to your point, whether it's good, bad, ugly, lean in, learn more.
Yes.
Sometimes you'll learn, you'll have the curse of knowledge just because you always do it this way, you think it's just natural, but no, you're doing exceptionally well. On the flip side, it'll give you some feedback on how to, course correct.
Yeah, I love that.
All right, so we walked through the onboarding. Okay. There's still a couple big points from the HR perspective I want to dive in, and you gave a keynote to our mastermind group, which is a group of our, highest performing, owners within our brand. And one of the big topics of conversation was leadership, was HR, but was really crucial conversations, because my brain goes to, okay, we're recruiting, we're onboarding, but then, they're in the role, fast forward, and yes, hopefully things are going well, but many times they don't.
Correct.
How do you have those quote unquote crucial conversations to really resolve and really get the most output, for the company and also for your teammate?
First of all, the mastermind group was so amazing, so fired up. I love that. You don't get that in every group, right? So it's so cool. I think that having the crucial conversations really, I would say that one thing that when it usually comes to me, when a client comes to me, it's just they've waited way too long to have the conversation. And there's somewhere in between, for some reason, and I'm still working on kind of thinking through this, but for some reason, people think if I talk with them too soon, it'll feel like I'm micromanaging them, right? But then they wait way too long to have the conversation, and then it's gotten so big that the leader's so frustrated that I almost can't get them to think about, let's try to get the person back to the point where you want them to be, right? But it's just gotten on so long. So I'm always a fan of sooner rather than later. If it's bothering you, if you talk to one person about it, or you think about it one time after you go home, you got to talk to them about it, right? If it's like, oh, Bryce was late today, and okay, and then I'm like, cool, Bryce is never late, and I drop it. But if I mention it to, go home, my significant other, hey, God, Bryce was late today, that was weird. got to talk to you about it.
You got to address that.
You just got to talk to you about it, because then there's some reason that it's bothering me, and I just got to bring it up.
Totally. And one of the biggest takeaways actually at the mastermind that you presented for us was that the ability to, or the framework that at the very beginning, it's okay to micromanage a little bit, right?
Yes.
Because it is this common like thought that I think we've all had as business owners. I certainly have as well. And in fairness, my personality is probably not the micromanager. It's probably actually me to rail in a little bit more if I'm being very candid.
Yeah.
But that is a feeling, and it was refreshing to hear. It's like, okay, you can micromanage a little bit. Of course, do it with tact and making sure that, proactive communication, and you're delivering the message with positivity and showing them, making them feel good about the situation.
Right.
There's a way to handle it. But at the very beginning, that's really important to basically making sure they're doing the task right. So that way you don't fast forward 3 or 4 months later, to your point, and the person just like doesn't even know how to approach it because they've been, their blood's been boiling.
Exactly. I call it close management, right? I always say you can closely manage them. And I always say, like, tell them you're going to do it. Like, hey, welcome, I'm so excited you're here. And, not literally the minute they walk in the door, but part of their onboarding is, I want to let you know that I'm going to be closely managing you for the next 90 days. And it might feel a little tight. And I don't want you to think it's not because I don't trust your skills or value you, because you wouldn't be here if I didn't. It's because I want you to be successful here. Who's going to say no to that, right? Oh, well, I don't want to be successful here. Okay, well then good. We'll part ways now.
And it shows care,
right?
concern, and also too, I love that, Anne, because it just like it's managing expectations. And I feel like that's a lot of working with people, is really just like managing proper expectations. And if you put it on the table at the very beginning, then it actually makes, the experience for both of you during that first 90-day period is way better.
Yes, absolutely.
So any other, keep on going. Like, we want to get some big nuggets around.
I know. Okay, so what else on the inner? I mean, I would say that, like I said, waiting too long to talk to him for sure, and then just being really clear. I know that I feel like sometimes conversation, we're trying so hard to be. I know I want people to be kind, so don't get me wrong, but to be kind, that we start to use terminology of things that aren't clear. We say things like, well, what we want to do is what, and it's like, well, is it, are you going to be doing it with them, or do you need them to do it? So
do you mean because like human nature tends to sugarcoat things? Is that what you mean?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah. And I think it's, as a leader, no matter what anybody says to me, maybe there's a small percentage of people, most people want to be liked.
Yeah.
Right. Most people just want to be liked. And so it's hard. You're having these interactions. You're like, gosh, I'm going to have to work with this person every day, hopefully for a long time. And if they get frustrated with me or they don't like me, it's going to make it a little more difficult. But it's like, you got to be as clear as possible. Have you heard of that sandwich method before, where they say compliment and then, and I'm not a huge fan of that. I got to be honest, because I think it gets confusing. I just think when you're celebrating someone, celebrate them only, right? Don't bring in the negative. And I shouldn't say negative, but don't bring in corrective things. But when you're correcting something, correct them. Now, it doesn't mean you can't also say, like, I know you're going to be able to do this. You've got this. You're a valuable member of the team. But I don't think you should literally set up a method of like, here's a compliment, and then here's something corrective, and then here's a compliment.
And also to that style, if you do it that way, sometimes it can come off as a little inauthentic. And I think that's really, whereas sometimes it's hard to, I guess, deliver the message, at first, and also probably hard to receive it, but it comes off very direct. It comes off authentic. And of course, like, your tonality is important, making sure that the message is delivered with love and care.
Yes,
but
always.
It increases like authenticity.
Yes. I always say, like, you've got to come from that kind place. Like, got to be, I just think that's the place you got to come from. And you can be kind and clear. Mm-hmm. They do work together. Mm-hmm. And you can even say that this is a tough conversation. This is a tough conversation for me to have with you, but I got to have it with you. You can set it up so it doesn't have to feel so tense and stiff and like you're in trouble, and it doesn't have to be formal. I think there's a lot of room in the workplace now to be a little more just kind and loving, and just really just looking at that experience of talking to someone about performance in a different way.
And also too, I mean, at least from my experience, Anne, it's just, you get better as you go, right?
You do.
I look back at my career 10 years ago when I first launched my first Fit Body in 2012. And, I needed so much leadership, so many communication skills. Like, I wasn't, accustomed to having tough conversations when coaches or trainers or admins wouldn't perform, or maybe, come up late. But it's a muscle, right?
So true. I did a video on I was a bad manager. It's like, I know so much about leadership because I was terrible at it. Like, I was a bad manager for a while. I even had an employee like report me to the CEO. Like, I cannot work for her. And that was a huge turning point in my career because I was like, oh, wait, what kind of manager have I become? Like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to be this person someone doesn't feel like they can work. And this was someone I recruited in. Like, I really valued them, but they did not feel that from me. I was not making them feel valued. And so they felt like they had no other option but to go talk to my CEO and say, I don't feel important. But what I love about that story is that she didn't quit and she stayed with me. And she came and talked to me later and said, yeah, I 100% went to your boss and said you weren't doing what I thought you should be doing, but I believe in you. It was like a reverse pep talk. It was like, I believe you can do this, and I don't think this is who you are. So I think it's a moment for you to rethink the way you're leading people. And I was like, whoa.
Good on her.
Yeah,
Awesome.
like who gets that opportunity?
Yeah,
and she stayed with me. And what was funny is I went to another company and recruited her with me. Again, like it was like that. It was like, I was like, this person's amazing. Like they saw that there was a problem. They did something about it, which, I can't say I loved it at the moment. I'm not pretending.
Clearly,
I wasn't yay, the CEO brought me in to talk to me about my leadership and that my employee's not happy. But I'm so glad that she did because it was a huge turning point for me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right. So going down the lane, we have HR, we have the recruitment process, we have the onboarding process, we have the crucial conversation process.
Yeah.
Now kind of let's go towards the end of the journey, if you will.
Yeah.
And whether it's a resignation or termination, that's never fun.
No.
But there's a tactful way to handle that, especially in the gym, business when, again, as we were just talking about, your team is your product, and, your clients typically have like very good amount of, your coaches have a huge amount of influence on your clients. And depending on where you're at in your business, if you're far removed, they could actually have way more influence than you. So it's a very, very important topic for, all companies, but specifically our business. So can you kind of give us some pointers of some things to do, maybe not to do?
Well, a good termination, I feel like always goes well, or better, I shouldn't say well, goes better if you've done a good job communicating down the line, as we've been talking about. Like, so they know where they stand, they know when things are going well, they know when they're having challenges. And so hopefully, if you have to make the decision to move somebody out, it's not a complete surprise. And that's a question I often ask clients right away when they'll say, okay, I want to terminate this person. I'll say, are they going to be surprised? And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, so I'm not saying, I didn't say they were going to like it, but if you're like, well, you've talked to me 3 or 4 or 5 times about this, I guess this is sort of the inevitable end. Or like, what? Like, again, no news. I've had no news. I've had no feedback. No one's told me anything. Or sometimes I'll find that they've been telling them their meeting expectations because they didn't want to have a tough conversation when it came around to review time. So they were just checking meet expectations. Cool. And then they turn around and terminate employment. So I think it's communicating with them to make it better. And then just always treat people with dignity and respect, as best as you can. Know that it's no one wants to hear they're being terminated. It's a tough situation. And I always tell the leader, like, I don't expect you to come out of this as friends with your employee, but just do your best to preserve their dignity and respect. And maybe they will, maybe ideally they'll leave and still have a positive feeling about their experience with you. Like, that's what we're shooting for, but it's also at the same time, it might not happen, and that's okay.
Can you think of a situation, like an example that you think of that's like, oh, wow, that is probably as good as it, possibly could have came?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, I can think of several times in my own career, and I can think of even leaders I've worked with, but this one employee comes to mind for me that we had met with. It's just similar, like several times about the same issue. They were just not meeting just overall performance expectations. It seemed like they would do well, and then they would drop off, right? And they would do well, and then they would drop off. It was just like this constant roller coaster. It was up and down. So kind of by the third conversation, I just said, listen, this is our third conversation. Like, where do you see this going at this point? Like, you have the control. Like, we want you to stay here, but you have to sustain your performance. So where do you want this to go? And they were like, oh, I really want to be here, and I'm going to make it work this time. Okay, well, we're going to give you another chance, and what I always like to ask, what support do you need from us? Like, is there something you need from us? Is there training? Do you need to shadow somebody? Do you need a reminder? What do you need?
That's great advice.
Yeah, because there might be something that you can do for them,
Totally.
right? So what do you need from us? And okay, so he didn't really need that much. Fine, no problem. So we went on, and then it happened again. It was just like, okay, we have tried. We have really, I like to say, like, have you turned over every stone at this point, right? Have you tried everything to help this person be successful? And there's just we've got to make a decision to move them out. Because when you keep kind of a low performer, underperformer, you are again impacting the team, right? And they're seeing like So we're all here doing our job, but you're continuing to accept this behavior from this person. Why? And why are we working so hard if you're going to continue to accept that behavior?
Before you get to that, I just want to validate this point. Actually, it was in the boardroom about a month ago. My brother Barrett was just talking about, team dynamics, et cetera. And he cited your training for Mastermind. And he basically was saying, high performers, if they see low performers being tolerated, ultimately the high performers are the ones who are going to leave. And that's the biggest travesty. So I want to interject there, just validating that, because, we've seen it now a few times in the organization. It's just so true.
It's so true. They just get frustrated. It's like, well, I'll go somewhere else and, be part of a team that's a high performing team that appreciates me. So so in that situation, so I had to go back to him and say, listen, like, this is it. Like, we're done. We've had these multiple conversations, and unfortunately, of course, I didn't say we're done. I said, unfortunately, you've come to the time where we have to terminate your employment. And one of the things I like to do in a termination is always, it's kind of rushing them a little bit, but moving them to what's next. Because I want them to know, and we want you to know that any future employers you go out to apply, you can call here and we will verify your employment. Now, I'm not get on the phone and say, they're the best employee ever, but we're happy to verify your employment because employees start to worry about, oh my gosh, how am I going to tell people I'm terminated? And then what's my employer going to say? It's like, we're happy to verify your employment for you. I've even said to employees, like, I hope that this has all been a learning opportunity for you, and that you'll take this wherever you go next. And you're gonna be great wherever you go next. You can learn from this and you can be great somewhere else. That's exactly, so he did, he left. And it's funny because that's another person that I've kept in contact with periodically. And he's doing great, he's doing great. And we were still able to stay connected, even though it was a tough conversation. And I liked him. And that's kind of important. I can't remember if we talked about this in the mastermind, but sometimes you really like these people, right? And so it's like, I really like you. And why can't you be successful here? But for whatever reason, it's just not a match.
Yeah, and it sucks in that particular situation. Yes. But sometimes not sometimes you just have to separate the person then from the job performance, and ultimately, even though you can like them, they're going to be better suited somewhere else.
Absolutely, yeah.
What's up, my friend? Bryce here. Now, you might know me as the co-host of this podcast and the CEO of FitBody. But what many people don't know is that I actually began my journey as a FitBody franchise owner. Now, being an owner, I wake up every day absolutely doing what I love. I live my passion. I help people transform their lives and have both financial and personal freedom. And it's for these reasons and many more that other owners join the brand and open their own FitBody locations too. So if you're looking to build a highly profitable business, take charge of your life, and create an impact in your very own community, then opening a FitBody gym might be a perfect fit for you. Now, to see if a territory is available in your area, as we have very limited spots due to our incredible growth, go ahead and visit our website at fbbcfranchise.com to complete an application. Well, thanks, and back to the show.
All right, Anne, this has been awesome. This is so valuable considering this is the framework of our business. So super, grateful. The last big topic I just want to kind of unpeel the onion was really the leadership, because we've talked about tactics and strategies and basically, how from an HR perspective, but really, the thing that makes this all work is like really good leadership skills. So from your perspective, like what's your framework of leadership? Maybe some, some suggestions on ways to become a better leader. And then maybe the other side, like what are some things that you've seen in your career that you should avoid like the plague?
I think, and some of them we've kind of touched on a little bit, but I think some of the things, the best leaders I've seen are great communicators. They truly care about their team and they are putting their team first. And that's, one thing I will say that I've had people say, and I don't know if this comes up much for your owners, but they'll say, I want them to feel like they own the business.
Yes.
But do they own the business? Because if they don't own the part of the business, then maybe we can't expect them to act like owners. So I had this conversation with a client over a receptionist position, and they said, oh, but I really want her to act like an owner. And I said, but is she an owner? Well, no, she's not an owner. I just want her to act like one. And I said, I think at that time, I don't know, he was paying her $15 or $18 an hour. And I said, what you want from her is to be the receptionist that you hired her to be, right? She really can't be the owner unless you make her an owner, unless she owns part of the business. So I don't know. Do you feel differently about that?
No, it's interesting. I love these takeaways because your insights are profound. Especially this is your bread and butter. It's interesting. I see that point for sure. At the same token, you want that teammate. Really, what you want them to take ownership of the responsibility.
That's right.
That's really
right.
what it is.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you want to take ownership of their responsibility. You want them to feel really proud of what they're doing every day and leave feeling like, I did a great job, right? But they can't act like an owner of the business.
No, because that would actually cause chaos if they're just making shots calling shots left and right. And you're like, whoa, let's back that up. But I think also too, I mean, it comes with time and evolution. You want them to have ownership of their responsibility, but then as you continue to like elevate them in the organization, maybe they start as a coach and then they're a head coach and then they become the integrator of the business. I mean, then you want them to have like maybe that, deeper mentality, but that is a really good point that you bring up. So.
Yeah, I hear it a lot. I hear it a lot about the ownership piece. And then I think leaders should really have clearly defined values. And a lot of time companies have values, of course, but I want leaders to make sure that they either are living those values or they have values that sort of align with those. And then they define what the sort of behavior expectation is along with those values. Because I think what I find is you want people to make the right decisions when you're not there, but they need the framework to do it. So you have the values, you have the behaviors that you sort of expect in alignment with those values, what that looks like, so they know what it looks like to act out that value.
Yeah.
And then they can be better when the leader's not there. Because that's always, I think, I shouldn't say always, but that's a real common thing that I hear about, right? Like somebody made a mistake when I wasn't here, or they didn't do what I thought they would do, or that, how did this happen? It's like, but if they have some more framework to work within, they'll be better at doing that.
Totally. And what would your suggestion, to maybe not only build a framework, but it really, I guess, comes down to training and communication. You talked about leaders have good communication skills, but how does a business owner basically, take the framework they have, take the values they have, and really instill that to their team? I guess that's the disconnect we'd love to get your advice on.
Is a disconnect. It's so true. You're right. And I think that's what I say to leaders is when you define those values, make sure so one of the things that was really helpful to me when I was learning how to define my values was that, or for my company, was that they can be things you're striving for. It doesn't have to be something you've already accomplished. And that was huge for me because I was like struggling. Like,
what do you mean by that?
One of our values is excellence, for example. Well, I can't say we're excellent every day. I can't say we've mastered excellence, but that is one of our values because that's what we're striving for. We're striving to be excellent in everything that we do. So that's what I mean. Like you might not quite be there yet, but that's one of your values. That's a core value for us. It's something we talk about all the time. So just that, I always say that to leaders, like know that the values can be things that you're still just striving for, that you definitely want to be one of your values. You're not hitting it every time, but it's there. Now I forgot what I was saying, Bryce. But it was.
We're just having too much fun. I'm interjecting you the whole time. I apologize.
No, it's fine. But yeah, so I think I think you said like, how do you get to instill those values? Is that you have to know that you're going to live them too, and you can't. It's not like do as I say, not as I do, right? Okay, so you've got to actually be willing to live the values. So when I created my values, I mean, I check myself sometimes, and I'm like, am I even leading this value right now? Did I just confuse my team because I just did something that wasn't in alignment with values?
It's so true. And this was years ago, but I believe the 21 Laws of Irrefutable, or 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell, and actually a different book, but he talks about moral authority. And really moral authority is what he says is people will not do what you say. They're going to do what you do.
Yes.
And really defining moral authority in John Maxwell's terminology is, do you walk your own talk? And that really, from a leadership perspective, is really the framework that you're alluding to.
It's huge. Yeah. Because you really need to, it is confusing for the team and they won't. That's why, I mean, we talked about interviewing and things like that. And I'll say to people, like, if you want people to show up on time to work, you should run an on-time interview, right? And you should demonstrate that you're prepared for them and all the things it's like that you want someone to show at a later time. But you're teaching them from the minute you start interacting with somebody from that hiring process. Sorry to get back to hiring for a second, but you're teaching them all the way down what kind of leader you are and what your values are.
It's so true. Ed Milet, I'm not sure if you've
100%,
we were just talking about,
yes.
And I just watched him on a podcast the other day talking about how leadership skills or just skills in life are caught, not necessarily taught.
Yes.
And really what that means is, like, to your point, I just had this flashback. Okay, if you want to set the tone and basically you're trying to recruit and hire someone really strong, you need to demonstrate to them basically what it's like to be part of your team and what you're looking for. That's going to be caught. That's not necessarily like something you teach. And maybe you could do both.
Right.
So.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh man, this is great. I think from my perspective, why this is so valuable, I mean, because, in the fitness business, I mean, your team is your product, your people is your product. Primarily, we say that we're in the people business. Secondarily, we're in the fitness business, the nutrition business, the coaching business. But your people make it happen.
Yes.
And if I could look back and rewind the clock to 2012 when I launched my first business, I was so excited to be the best coach ever. And certainly that's very important in our space, right? To be the best coach or like get the best results, provide the best nutrition coaching. But if I look back, I would say, Bryce, develop your leadership skills because that will be the key to unlock everything.
It really is. And you know what's interesting is very few companies spend time investing in that. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning, like you get promoted, you were great at your skills, and then now you've got people, and then sort of somehow we stop the conversation. And then if you go to talk to your supervisor, often they were never trained in how to manage people. So it's really unfortunate. Like I wish we could spend a little more time, like you do, like investing in our teams and really teaching them how to be the best leaders they can be.
Totally.
Yeah.
And for me, I come my previous career and I kind of came with the sales background. And to your point, just because you're a great salesperson does not mean translate you're going to be good at managing and leading the sales team.
Yes.
Because the job function is in that particular role is the sales function, but that function changes when you get to a leadership or management role.
So different.
So that's kind of what my first mind went to.
Yeah, it's so different. Yeah, most people are not ready for that.
No.
They're not prepared for it, I should say.
Sure.
They might be ready to take it on at some point, but they're not prepared.
But you know what? It's a learnable skill, just like anything else. And I think that's important. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, maybe I don't have the leadership skills, maybe I don't have the management skills. I certainly didn't. Granted, from your storytelling, you didn't either, right?
No.
But it's a learnable trait, and I think that's important. So,
yeah.
And you're awesome. You've been so gracious with your time. We still have some more time left for the lightning round if you're up for it.
I'm up for it. Here we go.
All right. Well, being in the fitness business, I mean, we're passionate people. You're a passionate person. You can just tell from the energy. What would you say, Anne, is your biggest passion today and why?
So I really feel like my biggest passion in this moment right now is to make as big an impact as I possibly can. And even as cliche as that might sound, I really am. I mean, I always say every time I speak to a group, I'm like, if I can impact just one leader, right? We were just talking about, I got to speak to a group of 150 people. If just one person like could hear what I said and go back and do something differently with their teams. Something that's really heartbreaking for me is to see not only a team that is, low morale, not motivated, feeling frustrated with their jobs, but the leader kind of feeling the same way. And I just want to be able to impact as many people as I can. Like that just fires me up every single day.
I love that. And you're doing that right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Next question. Anne, what's your zone of genius? What's your unique gift that you're called to share?
So I really think that I have a really good I think that one of the things that I'm good at, I should just say it that way, is that I can take a situation, no matter how complicated it seems to the leader, and bring it back to something practical that they can take and put into place right away. I'll be very honest. The first time someone ever told me I was practical, I hated it. I was like, I don't want to be practical. Like that sounds like a Swiss Army knife or something.
I think it's a good thing.
I know, right?
Oh, yeah.
So over the years, I really embraced it because it keeps coming up that's something that I do. And I'm like, oh, I love that. So anytime I'm in it, people constantly say, like, you took something that felt very overwhelming or complicated or whatever, and you were able to drill it down into something that I could understand, that I could implement, that I could try, right? And it felt so much more manageable. And that's huge.
Well, and I think when I hear practical, I think like traction and results is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I
right?
like that.
So,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
I should have called you the first time I heard that. I needed help.
There you go. We kind of alluded a little bit about this, but maybe you want to reinforce, maybe bring a different, point to light. But what is a unique value bomb that a new business owner should know, could be about HR, recruiting, leadership, et cetera, when launching their business, but they probably don't know?
I think it is the time piece, that it's going to take time to manage people, and you're going to already feel so stretched for time. I mean, I'm a business owner, right? I started my business 21 years ago, and you're already going to feel like, how am I fitting all the stuff I need to do in one day? And you're going to have to make time for your people. So how you do it will be a whole other thing, right? You're going to have to get very organized and structured on your time, or put in some extra time, but you have to make the time for the people. So I think it's like, yeah, they should know it. Maybe even they think they're going to know how much time it's going to take, but it's going to take more time than they think, but it's going to pay off. Like, it's like, if you will just invest up front, it'll pay off. You'll have so much more time later on, but you got to do that investment up front.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. Double-parted question. I'm going to ask you to be vulnerable here for a second.
Okay.
Out of all your success
I'm
and
ready.
accolades, But what would you say is one of the lowest moments or the lowest moment in your, business career? And the flip side, showcase your proudest moment or achievement.
Okay, so my lowest moment, and I know this always off the top of my head because it was so super low. So I don't know if it's 2007, 2008 when things were really bad, right, in business. So I had made the mistake. I got a very high paying client. And I made a mistake of putting about 80% of my business with this client. So basically, I'm sort of back to being an employee in a contract basis, right?
Yeah.
Not realizing that, but they were paying me very significantly. I was making a lot of money. And I was like, yeah, already started my business in 2001. So here we are, it's 2007 or 8 or 8 or 9, whatever that was, around that time. And they started going through, I have to tell you something really important. I would let them get behind in paying me, because they always paid me, but I would just let them get behind. The CFO calls me in her office, and I knew they were having some challenges with the funding they were getting and things like that, but there was no indication that I was going. And she said, okay, so today's the last day of your contract. And by the way, I don't think we can make good on the months that we owe you. And it was months. Like I had let it get like 3-4 months behind.
Oh, shoot.
I know. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I seriously thought I was just going to pass out right there. I remember this so vividly, like within the next day or two, sitting at my desk going, okay, like I started my business in 2001. I can do this again, right? But I didn't really, I had 20%, right, of other clients, but I didn't really have that much going on. Two really important things happened. One is I had a client who had ended up going in-house with HR. I'd helped them for a while. They went and hired somebody in-house, calls me and said, hey, we have a situation. We need you to come in and help us for a few months. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And then another colleague of mine reached out and said that Cal State Dominguez was looking for someone to lead their human resources certificate program in the evenings. And I love, this is my favorite conversation with him. His name's Jim. Love this guy. It doesn't pay very well, but it'll, it gives you good exposure. I often pick up clients and I'm thinking, doesn't pay very well. Like I literally am wondering how I'm going to pay my bills right now. Like if it pays me minimum wage, I'm taking it, right? And it paid so much better than what he said. Nice. I ended up doing that for 7 years. So it was huge, but and then from that moment on, I said, I will never do that again. I will never, no matter how good the money is, right? I'm not putting 80% of my business into someone's hands.
I feel like that's the takeaway actually from business ownership from my perspective. So I'm looking at you right now and maybe you have a job in the corporate career for a long time, but you never know when that can just be cut. So for me, I sleep way better at night having multiple clients,
yes.
And that way if something happens to one,
you have others. It was very stressful. I will tell you, they did eventually pay me though.
Oh, good.
There was somebody that worked for that company that was definitely my champion. It took them a while. But I said, I don't care. Just, can you just give me... Yeah. It was stressful though. Fortunately, I'm a saver. Like it wasn't like I was going to be on the street, but it wouldn't have been long term. Like I really felt like I was starting my business over again, like 7 years later. So it was a little crazy, but
there's silver lining.
It happens. I know.
And the flip side, what's the proudest?
So the proudest moment really is starting my business. It really is having that conversation with my boss, having this amazing boss who was willing to be supportive of me starting my business and going and starting it. And just, I didn't have a book of clients. I still, you know what? Anybody who starts a business, I will say, journal or write down what you're thinking. Because people will say to me like, well, what were you thinking? I don't know. I just wanted to do it. I knew I wanted to impact more people. Like I was doing a great job in each of my corporate jobs. I wanted to do more. Right. So I thought if I could have clients, I could impact more people. So I don't know what I was thinking, but it worked. And it was just sort of, I had a really good friend. I had money put away in savings. I had a really good friend and said, you cannot take a job for 3 months. And I said, yeah, but I'm not looking for a job. She goes, you're going to get an offer for a job. I got 2 offers like pretty quick after I left. Nice. And I remember calling her because one's for a very big company. And she said, nope. 3 months. She said, because after 3 months, I would still have enough savings if I had to go look for a job. The market was, it was probably like it is now. It was pretty good. I could find a job. But yeah, she said, you got to give this 3 months. And she was right. Within about 3 months, I got my first client. And then I was like, okay, I got my first client. Let me see how this goes. Yeah, so I'm really glad you put that restriction on me.
Winding down here, I got a couple more questions left.
Okay.
You're in the business of getting incredible advice, or giving, I should say. What's been one of the best pieces of advice you've ever received, and why?
Okay, so this was a long, long time ago, but where I went to high school, you had an opportunity. I didn't love PE, right? I didn't love dressing and playing basketball and whatever else. So you had an option to get into dance production if you could dance, and I'd been a dancer most of my life. And so I was going to try out for dance production. The morning of the audition, I had tons of anxiety. I'm like, they're not going to pick me. I'm not a good enough dancer. There's going to be really experienced dancers. And my mom just happened to say, so are you ready for your audition? And I said, I'm not trying out. And she said, what? I said, I'm not trying out, Mom. They're not going to pick me. Like, I'm not good enough. Like, is my song right? You know, all the things. I mean, how I was worried about everything. And she said, well, you're never going to know unless you try. I mean, she has a point. So I kind of quickly rehearsed in the living room because I hadn't even really finished what my audition dance was going to be. I kind of practiced in the living room that morning. And then I went and auditioned and I got in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And it was a really huge part of I was in it for 3 years in high school. It was a huge part. I love dance. I love the people I dance with. I learned so much, but it was huge. And it's something that is like one of those simple thing that a mom says, but it just replays in my head. Like, you're never going to know unless you try. And yeah, you might not make it and you might not be the best. But you'll for sure not going to make it if you don't go and try it out.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's so awesome because that's, Anne, one of the big burning desires I had about, first launching my first Fit Body location. I always want to be an entrepreneur and really, to your point, have an impact, make a difference in people. Fitness really changed my life. And I was scared. I was nervous, just like you were when you were like launch your business. But if you, or in this particular situation, the dance recital, but if you don't do it, ultimately the biggest question mark's always going to be looming in your head. And I don't want to live with that regret, and neither did you.
Yeah, it was awesome. I'm so glad she said that. She said a lot of good little tips, but that one for sure has lasted a long time.
Good on you both. Last two questions. Leaders are readers, and you certainly are a leader and coach leaders. So I'd love to hear, I should say, for our audience, a great book recommendation or podcast, some piece of learning that's really set you up for success in your journey.
It's kind of a more recent thing that I've read this book that I really, really like. It's called Boundary Boss. It's by Terri Cole. Okay. And I really like it because it really talks a lot about one of the things in entrepreneurship is having boundaries, like to make time for yourself, right? Make time for your family, when to say no, when to say yes. So I really have loved it. So although it's more recent, like I just read it a few months ago, it's been a huge impact for me. It's really something I've come back to over and over and over again. And just being comfortable really with setting some more boundaries so that I can have the life I've been working so hard for.
And I feel like for an entrepreneur, that is incredible advice and a good recommendation. So
yeah, because isn't it crazy? You work so hard and then all of a sudden you're working, that's all you're doing is working all the time and you're hearing it from everywhere, right? Like, why don't you have time for us? Why can't you come over? Why can't, it's like, wait a minute. I did want a life where I could have everything, right? I want to have a successful business and I want to be able to do things that I love, whatever that means.
Totally. And this has been awesome. I'm so grateful for you to be here. I know our audience has got a ton of value. My last question for you, being our audience is interested in fitness and business and entrepreneurship, also personal growth as well. What would be one piece of parting wisdom that will help them on their journey?
Leadership is challenging. And I think that in a lot of ways it's painted as this very simple and you're supposed to be charismatic and everyone's supposed to follow you. It's supposed to be so easy. And you even said it earlier. You can become a leader if you really want to become a leader. It's like there's this whole thing about, they're just naturally born with it. So I would say just if you're in a leadership position, just take the time to be the best you possibly can be and stick with it. And know that I think there's so many people out there experiencing the exact same thing, no matter what industry, no matter if they're a smaller organization, a bigger organization, so many leaders are struggling with the same thing. So you're not alone, even though it feels like you're very isolated. You're not alone. That way. Yeah, you definitely feel that way. You're absolutely not. Because you could find somebody to talk to, that'd be amazing. And just know that you can stick with it and you can get better. Like you said, years of experience. It's like putting in the reps over and over and over again. You're gonna get better at it. If you're committed to it, you'll get better at it.
Love that.
Yeah.
And this has been awesome.
Same.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Before I let you shoot, we'd love to really allow our audience to connect with you far past this episode. So where can they find you at?
Thank you. I would love that. So my website is theworksconsulting.com. That's works with an S. And I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, and it's easy. It's just my name, Anne Laguzza.
And you're awesome. And before we shoot today, I just want to thank you for showing up the way you do, your energy, your enthusiasm. You've already added a ton of value from a leadership and HR perspective to our organization, and you've done that in space today with our audience. And more than that, you're just a great person. I love being around. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. I feel the same way, Bryce. I feel like I'm super excited I met you. It's awesome to have you in my life. So thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, friends, I know you got amazing value from today. Assuming that you did, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe on YouTube and write us an awesome review on iTunes. That way we can keep producing this content for you for free. Oh, and by the way, drop your biggest takeaway in the comments. That would would really help us promote the show and really, again, add more value to you. So that's all for today. Anne, thank you again.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in the next episode.